Coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered for Monday, January 13th, 2020. Roland is traveling today. I'm your host, Dr. Avis Jones-Weaver. Cory Booker, the last black man standing in the 2020 almost next to last, right? In the 2020 Democratic presidential race, has dropped out. So much for diversity, right? We have questions for Mayor Pete Buttigieg. His record as an advocate for black people? Apparently it's not what he says. We'll tell you why. A recent poll shows that 6 in 10 black Democratic voters, contrary to popular opinion, identify as moderate or conservative. We'll break that down. A black Milwaukee woman dies after waiting in an emergency room for hours. And Trump's latest environmental rollback could hurt people of color and poor people the most. Plus, former NFL player Matthew Cherry gets an Oscar nomination for Hair Love. The children's book turned animated short. We'll show you Roland's interview with him from earlier this year. It's time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the miss, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time. And it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on roll, y'all. It's Roland Martin, yeah.
Senator Cory Booker announced today that he is dropping out of the race for the 2020 Democratic presidential nomination. Here's his announcement video.
I am literally here on this stage right now because 50 years ago, there was a lawyer on a couch who changed his life, changed his mind to get up and start representing families, one of them mine, who were discriminated against.
Ours is the story of the faith we have had in one another.
We know beating Donald Trump is the floor, it is not the ceiling. It gets us out of a valley, it does not get us to the mountaintop. It's not going to be a referendum on who he is, it's going to be a referendum on who we are and who we are to each other and for each other. We need all Democrats together to call to this country, to stand together, to work together, to rise together.
Today, I'm suspending my campaign for president with the same spirit with which it began. It is my faith in us, my faith in us together as a nation, that we share common pain and common problems that can only be solved with a common purpose and a sense of common cause. And so now I recommit myself to the work. I can't wait to get back on the campaign trail and campaign as hard as I can for whoever is the eventual nominee and for candidates up and down the ballot. But for now, I want to say thank you. Campaigning over this last year has been one of the most meaningful experiences of my life. Meeting you, meeting people across this country who believe, who know that we may have challenges right now in our nation, but together we will rise.
Although I'm shocked that that could be a commercial for the actual campaign, it's interesting that Booker's withdrawal follows former Cabinet Secretary Julian Castillo and leaves a less diverse field with Representative Tulsi Gabbard, entrepreneur Andrew Yang, and former Massachusetts Governor Deval Patrick as the only people of color candidates remaining in the race. Joining me now to talk about this is Derek Hawley, president of Reaching America, and political analyst Amisha Cross, political commentator and Democratic strategist, and civil rights attorney Robert Patilio. My goodness, I was shocked with the level of production. He had some money left over.
Maybe that's what it was. I think the issue...
His strongest fundraising was in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, that's actually his strongest... but I think the issue is exactly that video is the reason that he's dropping out of the campaign. He never gave this race a raison d'etre. He never gave a Cassia Belli. He never gave a reason that he's running.
Yeah.
And through the entire 30-second well-produced ad, I have no idea what he's running for. He never articulated to the American people what the issues are he's running for, besides, I hate Donald Trump. With Bernie Sanders, you know exactly what Bernie Sanders is running for. With Elizabeth Warren, with Joe Biden, you know what they are running for. But because he was never able to articulate the message, he was always kind of a squishy candidate.
Wasn't he the feel-good candidate?
He was trying to be a unity
trending
candidate.
on Twitter candidate, and that's the problem.
It seems like he's yelling at you, too.
Well, Bernie?
Cory Booker, you don't think he just is
Cory yelling? No, that's Bernie.
Cory was trying to be...
Bernie is scolding you all the damn time.
Cory was trying to be the unity candidate. He was trying to bring the party together that has since had a lot of fragmentation. I think some of that is pushed by the AOC crowd and also Bernie and Warren when we see, you know, the growth of the far left. He was trying to bring them together with the moderates to show that, hey, we need to do this and fight against the real detriment to America, which is Donald Trump.
He wasn't authentic. He wasn't real. I think that was a part of the problem, too.
And he also happened to be everybody's third or fourth choice candidate. I think that was also an issue. There are a lot of people who are sad that he's gone, but when you ask those same people, he was further down that list in terms of their priority.
But the problem is that you can be a unity candidate, but you have to stand for something. Like you have to say, these are the things that Cory Booker 100% stands for. This is what a Cory Booker presidency will mean, and he never did that. He wanted to take a little from column A, a little from column B.
Cory Booker had stood for the same things that he stood for the entire time he's been in the Senate as well as prior. He stood on criminal justice reform. That's something he can stand on. He has a record on it. It got lost in the wash. I think that part of the reason was, again, we were in a race that had way too many people in the beginning, and it was very hard for him to get that level of opportunity and to get his voice out there in that way. It wasn't that he didn't have these values, principles, and specific policies that he has enacted to stand on, because he did.
You know what's interesting? I wonder if Barack Obama would have been in this race, would he have dropped off too?
No.
Because the reason why I asked that is because you're right. It's so many people in this race. It's so broad. And the thing that really got his candidacy going was when he won Iowa. I'm not sure he would have made it to Iowa with this level of competition.
The reason why I want to say is
this level of competition, this level of fragmentation in the Democratic Party.
I think also too something that goes unspoken is you got to have that it factor. I don't think Cory Booker had that it factor. Obama has the it factor. He still has that it factor. So I think when you start looking at that, I mean, that plays a huge part.
But there was a time where Democrats heralded Cory Booker as the person who was going to have that it factor. Remember him coming off of his own DNC wowing speech that everyone was really excited about?
No, I don't think.
No, there was that time when he had that halo over his head where people wanted to see him go.
When he was mayor.
No. Years ago.
When people loved Mayor Booker.
Yes.
Senator Booker, I think,
they love
is maybe a watered-down version of Mayor Booker.
The reason I think that President Obama would have absolutely had the same success is, if you look at that 2008 field, it was far more formidable than this 2020 field.
America didn't look like it did.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the quality of the candidates. I'm just talking about the number of candidates.
But even then, you had Dennis Kucinich running, you had Chris Dodd, you had Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, you had Bill Richardson, you had a large, diverse field, and President Obama, simply put, ran a better ground game. He ran a better campaign. Cory Booker ran a poor campaign.
But he also, and you're right, to his point, he probably still could have, risen above the crop. But I think that there is something to be said about a race that has 20+ people in it. This is the largest that we've ever seen in America.
All the 20 people we know 4. Let's be fair.
Exactly.
Like, nobody's talking about, Steve Bullock. Like, they say they're running, but nobody really cares about those campaigns.
Obama also didn't have to run against any billionaires. I mean, it's a completely different dynamic right now, and I really think there needs to be some more discussion. I mean, what do you think about the Democratic Party? I mean, maybe even changing. We've talked about this for years. It never happens. But having 2 of the whitest states in the nation be the states that, in essence, weeds the field out for us, it's ridiculous when you look at the complexion of the country, not to mention the Democratic Party.
But people make that argument often, but we had that same one when Obama won. And Obama also won Iowa. So I'm like, they were just as white 8 years ago as they are today.
Right.
So I think that, that goes to the it factor. It also goes to his strategy on the ground. It also goes to him being a dynamic candidate. But I also feel like there has to be an understanding that not only the candidate's message matters, but also who that candidate is matters. Obama had a lot of different factors that you don't necessarily see every day commonly on either side of the political aisle.
And just to chime in, I also think that Iowa and New Hampshire mean a lot less now than they meant 20 or 30 years ago.
You think they mean less?
Far less now, because let's understand, nobody really cares who wins Iowa. You just need to place. If you're top 3, top 4 in Iowa, you're fine. New Hampshire...
Funders do care.
Oh, no. If you're waiting until Iowa to get your money, it's too late.
But if you got enough money, i.e. Bloomberg,
you don't need to worry. Or even Joe Biden, who has the name recognition, has the money. He doesn't have to win anything till South Carolina, and he will be absolutely fine. So I think Iowa and New Hampshire have kind of taken themselves out of that Primrose positioning of actually mattering in national elections. It's nice. If you're going to be an insurgent candidate, it's a good thing to win, but it's by no means a fait accompli if you lose. Look at Giuliani's strategy in 2016, which was just go camp out in Florida and hope you can win there. So I think more candidates are ignoring those early states.
But I think it drives the narrative, though. I mean, every day, if I see another damn poll about what's going on, I'm going to scream, because I'm like, I don't really care what they think. But, on the other side of the coin, if you're looking at a Cory Booker, if you're looking at what happened with Kamala, if you're looking at Duvall, who unfortunately it looks like nobody's really talking about at all, the reality is that I think any other black candidate that comes behind Obama is going to have a much more difficult time, let's just say it, earning the trust of the black vote. I mean, and what are your thoughts about that?
I think that's 100% factual. We've seen all of the postmortems, years after Obama, and there is a concerted amount of African Americans who aren't necessarily pleased with where America is today in retrospect. They don't think that we got as far as they would have hoped for. They don't think that the bill of goods that was sold during that campaign, they actually saw on the back end. And I think that with that being said, the belief that we're going to have a magical black candidate and he's going to change the structural racism across America, I don't think that that's there anymore.
There was a point in time where representation was enough. We were all just happy to have a black face in the White House. I think now that that's happened, now we are looking more towards policy, more towards not just simply falling into the wash. And it's a little bit like the Bulls after Jordan retired. Nobody wants to be the person that follows Jordan. You don't want to be Eddie Curry. You don't want to be Tyson Chandler. You don't want to be Jalen Rose.
But it's also a good thing, though, Robert, because it is set it has set up a dichotomy that says that beyond representation not being the only thing that matters, that you have to continually push for policy change and advocate for things specific to.
Well, I don't think black people voted for Trump, good Lord, for Obama because he was black. I mean, to me, that's kind of like how you reference that.
I think that they set him up.
What happened was the reason why he won after he won Iowa, then they saw that him as a realistic candidate that could actually win. And I think they did go with their heart, and they liked what he was saying. But I think that, ultimately, at first, I think the bottom line is black people are very pragmatic voters. We don't want to throw away our vote.
Right.
I think that has a lot to do with why Biden is doing so well, not because black people love him, but because they think that he probably has the best chance of winning.
I walked through the snow to go to Obama headquarters on West Adams Street to do phone banking because he was black.
Obama received
so I don't know what delusion y'all are talking about.
Well, you're right. I mean, it became a movement unto himself. But what I'm saying is that he did have to prove himself first that he was viable, because it's not like he's the first black candidate to ever run for president. So, it is.
And most black people were in the Hillary camp before Iowa.
Exactly, absolutely, well into the Hillary camp. And so I think what happened was, once they saw that he was viable, I think there was a head versus heart moment.
Right.
And once they saw that he was viable, people were like, okay, I can actually go with my heart as well as my head, because I think he now has a chance. And you're right, he became the movement. Yeah. He became the movement.
Yeah.
But what do you think about Duvall? That's supposed to be his boy. Is he going to be able to get some sort of magic out of this?
But just as we said with Kamala, just as we said with Cory, what is Duvall's purpose in running? What is his reasoning? What is what makes you different than the other 30 people who put their hats in the ring to be a Democrat? I don't think anybody has a clear understanding of that, and that's why he hasn't broken out. He hasn't gotten the media attention. He hasn't gotten the fundraising dollars. It's a very good question as to what exactly his plan was, and the national media is not paying attention. Black media is not paying attention. I'm not quite sure what the plan is.
Yeah. It's also the timing. So you wanted to jump in late. You can do that if you're a billionaire. It's hard to jump in late when you're not. It's hard to jump in late when you're trying to build a campaign infrastructure and everybody's basically already chosen which camp they want to be a part of when it comes to campaign workers, people who are devoting their time, their energy, their own resources to get this thing off the ground. He's going to have a really hard time. We've already seen it for the other candidates of color who are no longer in the race.
Right.
And many of them had longer records in politics and policy at the national level than he does. Yeah. So I think that there is, it was an interesting thought process for him to jump in at the time he did, but I'm also wondering now what that, watching Cory leave, what is he thinking at this point?
Right, but he would say, hey, I'm only the second elected black governor in history post-Reconstruction. I jumped in late because my wife came down with cancer. I have legitimate reasons about these choices. But for some reason, he's not catching fire.
Because no one knows, and plus he doesn't have the money either. It takes money to gain traction. He doesn't have it. It's too late. And I don't think his campaign, again, he has no substance. And he hasn't talked about any kind of what are his policies and what does he stand for?
We would know if he had the money. Like he has a website with all this stuff on it. No one knows because it's not able to be promoted.
Yeah, so it all boils down to the money. He needs the money, honey. I guess he needs some money. Well, we're going to come back right after the break and talk about Mayor Pete.
You want to check out Roland Unfiltered? YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it.
So Mayor Pete Buttigieg hasn't really caught on in the African-American community with his 2020 bid. His team did a poll that suggested that it was because of his sexual orientation. But that's not the case. There are several things in his background that are extremely questionable as it relates to African Americans. For example, a recent article in The Root revealed that when Pete Buttigieg took office in January 2012, after winning the city's first open mayoral election in 24 years, South Bend actually had 3 African Americans in highly visible positions in public leadership, including the mayor's assistant, Lynn Coleman, the fire chief, Howard Buchanan, and police chief Daryl Boykins. Within 3 months now, all 3 were gone. And on a recent visit to a homeless shelter in Watts, California, he was greeted by a dozen Black Lives Matter protesters, many from his hometown, who called him anti-Black and anti-poor. So, do we need to dig deeper into Mayor Pete's background? What do y'all think?
I think you absolutely dig deeper, but I do always have cause when somebody suddenly starts rising in the polls and then all of a sudden all this racist stuff just pops up. Just like this week, Elizabeth Warren suddenly says that Bernie says that a woman can't win. Where was all this the last year and a half when he was running? Mayor Pete has his problems when it comes to African Americans. He tried to reach out to Black voters by drinking 40 ounces on a YouTube series. That was a poor idea. He tried to reach out to Black people by eating fried chicken.
Wait a minute, wait, stop.
And Elizabeth,
I missed that.
And
You
Elizabeth,
did what?
And Elizabeth Warren just hosted a fried chicken thing for Black people too. So, I mean, if we're going to talk about missteps, we need to count all of the missteps.
No, he did not.
No, I'll show it to you. Yeah, but look, the problem is, this points to one big problem, which is that many of these candidates, even though the rank and file of the Democratic Party, people who vote every election cycle, are older Black women, the people who are knocking on doors are usually younger Black people. The people running these campaigns are very rarely African Americans, and that's why they don't know how to reach out to Black folks, because they don't have Black folks around them. So I think Mayor Pete's record is absolutely something that's fair, but we have to also look into the fact that these campaigns are not being run by people who look like us. The polling, the messaging, the strategy is not being set by us. The posters, the mail people are not being set by us, and that's why you're getting lily white policies.
Well, here's the thing. Here's my thought about Mayor Pete, and I would love your reaction to this, Amisha. I don't think it's that, it's just popped up. I think it's just that, quite frankly, the mainstream media loves themselves some Mayor Pete. It's just like, Miss Jenkins from, Martin. Don't say nothing bad about Miss Jenkins. Okay, don't say nothing bad about Mayor Pete.
Right.
They will not release anything. Anytime you see all of these videos coming out with him, insulting the intelligence of Black people, essentially, all of the nefarious things that he did apparently in his particular small town with regards to the Black community there, none of that is coming from the Washington Post, the New York Times, Politico. None of them are coming from those spaces. They're coming from places like The Root, places that are more independent organizations who are the only ones apparently involved in investigative journalism. So what is happening with the mainstream media?
Investigative journalism.
Well, how come none of these have come up from the mainstream media, but they are all over themselves, for example, with all the hit pieces with Kamala Harris? Why do you think that Mayor Pete gets a free ride?
Now, I will say that I think that Kamala Harris was treated unfairly by the mainstream media. With Mayor Pete, I don't think that there's a free ride at all. What I think happens is that we've seen him continue to grow throughout this campaign process and continue to get further and further ahead in the polls. He was flying under the radar for months in the beginning because, honestly, nobody thought he was going to be able to make it to where he is right now. They didn't. People didn't think that he was going to be a mainstay player in this race at all. They counted him out as a small-town mayor, somebody with very little experience, thought that he would be a blip and he would be gone. I think that right now you're seeing mainstream media be more attentive because, to be honest, he's got more people who are surrounding him. He's got greater stance. He's making the fundraising dollars. He's really carved a space for himself throughout this election process. To be fair, though, I think that pieces like Michael Harriot's, and if you've been following him, I know that a lot of Black people have. He has made a concerted effort to go after Mayor Pete and almost Mayor Pete solely. Yes, he has written some investigative pieces on a few other candidates as well. But when it comes to the fervor, when it comes to the amount of articles, this has been a him and Mayor Pete. And that's a very interesting thing. And Mayor Pete has taken to actually go and have a conversation with him.
I remember.
There was a phone call between them. And we see more and more of these pieces from him come out, and many of which have also had particular elements of them debunked. And nobody is talking about that either.
What was debunked?
I think it's very important that folks realize that.
What was debunked?
So when he makes these statements about how little support that he has, how many people are against him in South Bend, there are so many people who have come out who have been
okay, but nothing has been debunked with regards to the facts of what actually happened in South Bend.
When we're talking about the officers that you were saying that got removed, the ones who were in leadership, we know that happened. That's right. Public knowledge. It's been there. And that wasn't something that Michael Harriot said that nobody didn't already know.
Exactly. So that's factual. And when we talk about what he did with the former sheriff there and the tapes that he claims that he
and we have no way of knowing whether they were heard or whether they weren't.
Okay.
So this is a leap that Harriot is taking and leading along Black people who are only looking at this as their source and taking it as fact.
Mm-hmm. So I just find it very interesting though that Do you think it's just a coincidence that all of a sudden all these black people are no longer employed once he becomes mayor 90 days later?
No, I don't think anything's coincidental. I think that there was and anybody looking at it knows that there was a tragic situation that was happening within that police department that should have been handled specifically. I can't say, without full knowledge of the details of the case, which I don't think that we currently have.
Right.
A lot of that is sealed away anyway, so I don't think anyone can make those types of logical leaps.
Okay, and the fact that he claims that he didn't understand that there was segregation in public schools in his own city. You think that's okay?
There is segregation. As somebody who comes out of the education policy framework and has worked at the national level and at the local level, I can tell you there are black mayors across this country who don't know that segregation is happening in their cities as well.
Are you serious?
Dead serious. Again,
really?
I have fought
that
on
they
behalf
don't
of
know that it's coming on, or they're not doing anything about it. That's two different things. I mean, if you are having Mayor Pete come out and saying he's lived there all his darn life,
right.
I mean, there's so many things. There's so many things. And the reason why I'm just kind of, it seems like maybe I'm picking on, but the reason why I am is because I believe that Main Street media has been giving him a pass.
There you go.
They have not been critiquing him at all. And at the same time, they have been disparaging the black community by saying the reason why we don't like him is because he is homosexual. The reality is that we have critical thinking skills. And we see what has happened in South Bend. And if he wants to extrapolate what he's done to South Bend to the rest of the black population, I sure as hell don't want him as president.
I just agree with you on everything you just said. Because first of all, he has a very small black constituent. And